Hi, this is Jerry Hebert. This is a training video for hinges identification and to know what kind of hinge that you need in what kind of application. If it's a standard heavy duty, their most common hinge to the market today would be for commercial, because this is all about commercial hardware. So this is a commercial hinge right here. The most common one that you're going to find is a 4.5 by 4.5. You'll notice that it's the exact same dimension each way. That may not be the case when you get to a job. You may want to pull off the hinge and actually measure it to make sure that you're getting the right hinge for the right application. Also, if it's a heavy duty door, if it's over a certain size, you may end up with a 4.5 by 4.5 inch hinge. But if you really want to be careful, if you can tell the difference in the thicknesses between these two hinges, and if you look at them head on, you're also going to see they're different, totally different weights. One's real heavy duty and one is standard duty. You'll notice that all these hinges that I'm showing you have ball bearing. They'll have BB in the number, which is ball bearing. So it'll be a 4.5 by a 4.5 BB NRP. You see this little thing right here? Can you see that? That is a little Allen screw. NRP stands for non-removable pin. This is a security hinge. You'll notice that it has no way to unscrew this hinge from either way. That's just a hole in the bottom. You will have to release this pin to be able to pull the hinge out so that you could actually use this on an exterior door. Almost all the ones that you see are like that unless you go with an older or an interior hinge. And this thing, you'll see how it's got a head and there's nothing holding this thing in. This is a standard 4 inch by 4 inch. It's very rare to see this on a commercial door. This is more of a residential kind of hinge, so we probably won't be working with this much. We have them on because we do run into some manufacturers who had really cheap doors, made doors with a 4 inch by 4 inch hinge. It's just not very common. The other heavy duty application that you're going to see when somebody is using a 42 inch door and above, sometimes an 18 gauge, or they get down to 16 or 14 gauge doors, or whether they may, like penitentiary doors, have a 6 inch on center rib, which makes the door awfully heavy. Well, they have a hinge helper, it's called, Hagar makes them, and they go up in the top corner, and these things actually help hold the door, the extra weight, and keeps the hinges from taking all the load. If you wanted to also get into a hinge and you have a heavy door application, these work on storefronts and on regular hollow metal doors, wood doors, steel doors, and whatnot. This is a continuous hinge. This works that a lot of people used to refer to these as piano hinges because they go the entire length of the door, and they have these holes all the way down them. 1, 2, 3, every so far. And what these get screwed into the door, and some of them, there's probably 4 screws that go completely through the door, and they're through bolted the other side all the way through. This actually goes to the frame. This is mounted on the frame. This goes over to where the door is, and then you put the through bolts and the regular screw the regular door in, and this takes a lot of pressure, and they come in different heavy duty standard weights as well that you can buy. There's also going to be a difference in finishes. If you're using a hinge and an exterior application, say in the coast of Florida area, you probably want a stainless steel hinge, not a standard 26D, which is a brushed chrome hinge. The steel ones are a shinier surface. They're called a 32D, which is a stainless steel finish, and they last much longer in a corrosive environment. If you're doing work in healthcare facilities and whatnot, you'll probably run across different kinds of swing clear hinges. These hinges are made to go to the door and go to the frame. Say this was put on to the door frame, and this was put onto the door. Well, the door would swing completely back against the wall, and this hinge would get completely out of the way. See, the door goes all the way back. Boom. You'll find in some applications where you have to replace, you're putting a continuous hinge on or whatnot, you might want to get a blank plate to cover up the hinges that are there, so that you can put this down and caulk it to keep moisture and whatnot from getting into that location. If you are going into storefronts, most people, they're still referring to storefronts as hinges, where most of them are pivots. Nowadays, in the coastal regions where we worry about hurricanes, most of the storefront doors are going back to hinges now, regular hinges. But this was a replacement hinge for a storefront door, that when the pivot went, they would go and put these on. We don't really recommend that because there's no real security on this. This is presuming, I see it all the time in convenience stores, and it's a much better application to use a continuous hinge than something like this. As far as the normal hinges that you're going to see on a storefront, they're actually called pivots, and we have bottom pivots that are all different styles. We're going to do a video on pivots themselves and on storefront repairs, so that you can go on and see all these different kinds of pivots, and all the top of them, where did you like that? Where the hole where the pivot will go in from the door, and the sleeves, the bushings, and all that come with them, how to repair them, how to identify them, how to replace them. So there's just so many different kinds that's going to take a totally different video, and we're going to show you that actually on a job site, because that's not just like what we're doing here with hinges. You know, you have 8 screws per hinge, and you replace 8 screws. The biggest problem you'll have on a regular hinge is you're going to get there to do the job, and some of them will be corroded in place solid. There's 2 ways to do it. You either heat up the hinge with a torch, and beware, if you're working on frame, that you may have a fire, so don't do it on every situation. But be careful what you're doing. But the other way is there's impact drivers that we use that goes over the hole and you knock it out. Worst case scenario is you actually, when they snap off, you end up having to drill the hole and tap and die them. There are going to be actually videos on retrofitting that will go more in detail into that. These are more of an identification video. And the other big thing that you have to watch out for is you see that these corners right here are square, completely square. Well, exact same hinge, radius. Make sure that you watch out that it's a radius. You might get to a job, especially if you're using a stainless steel, and there's the radius on there, and you have to get out a grinder and try and grind this thing down, so that, you know, the customer doesn't realize that you ordered the wrong hinges, and that takes a lot extra time, and you're going to have an issue with with rust getting on that area that you had to grind down because you've wore the finish off of that. So we would like to see you do it right the first time. Okay? Well, this is Jerry, and thank you for joining me on Hinges identification. So we're going to give you a quick demonstration on a door pivot. So in case you came into this not sure exactly what a door pivot does and how it operates, this will give you a quick demonstration. There are 4 parts to a standard door hinge. There can be an intermediate hinge as well, but we're not going to be showing you one with an intermediate hinge. This right here would be the door bottom, and this actually goes underneath this, inside the storefront itself, and the threshold goes over here. So all you'll see sticking out is this nub right there, right next to the threshold. Well, the door has a pivot point onto the door, which is the top part of the bottom hinge. If you can see this right here, this is a bushing with bearings. This actually has ball bearings inside of it. You'll see storefront doors getting lower and lower and some funny stuff coming out the bottom, and then it looks like the door is going to fall off. Well, that's because all those ball bearings have got worn down so much that they're no longer working, and the door gets harder and harder to use and starts rubbing on the threshold and whatnot. Well, that part right there rides on that nub, and there is on this particular one an adjustment screw. You would have to release that to be able to adjust that up. But this is only really supposed to be used when you're first installing them. If the door is getting lower and lower after, it's because you're wearing out your ball bearings and really need to replace the pivots. So that rides on there. The weight of the door will pivot on that point, and on the top point you're going to see this on right there. You'll be looking straight up at that going, okay, this part right here goes completely into here, and it pivots in here, and this goes into the top frame of the door, and this is the top pivot point of the door. Okay? And that's just a quick rundown of how pivots work. And to see more about the pivots, you'll have to look at the video on pivots, on storefront pivots themselves. There's a lot to go over on pivots. Thank you.